Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Co-Creators of a New World. And that new world I'm talking about is actually happening in our hearts and in our consciousness now. More and more people, and you'll see as I speak to these amazing co-creators whom I've gathered, how many people truly hold that vision in their hearts. Today, I am really excited to have somebody who is well, his work is very important, let me tell you, and it's really been pivotal in my life. His name is Robert Schwartz, and he is a master at something that we all need to learn, which is putting things in a very high perspective. Let me read Robert's wonderful bio to you. Hold on, I'm going to use it from the computer. Robert is a hypnotist who offers spiritual guidance sessions, past life soul regressions, to contact a deceased loved one, regressions, and between life soul regressions to help people heal and understand their life plan. His first book, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, explores the pre-birth planning of physical illness, having disabled children, deafness, blindness, drug addiction, alcoholism, the death of a loved one, and accidents. It's amazing. That is the book that I found on a retreat, Rob. So that's how I know about you. And I read it while I was on retreat. In addition to the subject of pets, his new book, Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, explores the pre-birth planning of spiritual awakening, miscarriage, abortion, caregiving, sexuality, adoption, poverty, mental illness, and other life challenges and experiences. You can visit Robert online at www.yoursoulsplan.com or write to him directly at rob.schwartz, SCHWARTZ, at yoursoulsplan.com. Welcome, Rob. I am so happy to have you here today. And I know you have a lot to share.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you today.
Yeah. As I said, I was on a retreat, and I was in the process of writing the book that this gathering is a celebration of, Love Seed, the Template for Birthing a New World. And I was writing a lot about, in the book, partially memoir, but other things woven in. And it was a story about my dad and how important it was for me to tell that story, and how key it was that we had the struggles that we had with each other to help me to become the person I am today. And so I found your book while I was writing that, and it really put a lot of things into place. So what I'm going to do is just read a snippet from the book about that, and then we'll get going with the interview. Okay.
Sounds good.
So yes, this was a time when I referred to a time when I was 4 years old. This particular incident set the stage for much of what unfolded in my life, and my father played his role, a very important one. From a traditional therapeutic perspective, he was my perpetrator and I was his victim, an abused child. From that moment, the chemistry of my brain and my developing false self or personality began to shape the contours of my life, and I became a fierce defender of those less strong than I. From the standpoint of a spiritual intelligence, this was the wound that cracked me open. My father played a role that only he could play, and this was my karma with him. As I did the work of transformation and therapy, the much larger picture of my father's life and its connection to my life unfolded before me, and the love he had for me was so strong that it reached through the defenses I had built. I connected with my dad on a soul level and felt the grief and remorse that he held as a result of the rupture between us. After years of anger and hurt, I felt only love for him. I was now moving in the direction of my dharma. True forgiveness is when you realize that there is nothing to forgive. When I say that I'm grateful for my father and all that our turbulent relationship offered me, I mean that from the deepest part of my being. It's really, every time I read that, I get touched because it's true. And that's what your work is really showing people, the gifts that we, the possibility of gifts from those that we struggle with, among other things.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that and being willing to be vulnerable and sharing it in such an open-hearted manner. Uh, what you've just described there, and I have to say, I think your life plan sounds similar to mine. I grew up in a very abusive environment as well. And people ask, well, why in the world would a soul plan something like that? And the basic answer to that question that I talk about in my books, Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift, is that many life plans are what I refer to as a learning through opposites plan. The soul learns best through opposites. So, for example, let's say that you wanted to deepen in compassion in this incarnation. That's one of your pre-birth intentions. In a learning through opposites plan, you would do exactly what you did. You would incarnate into a family in which there would be a profound lack of compassion in the external environment. And that lack of compassion is intended to give you both the motivation and the opportunity to go within and cultivate self-compassion. And later in life, the life plan calls for you to take the compassion you've cultivated toward yourself and turn it outward in service to others. So there are two parts to the life plan. Initially, cultivating the virtues that are important to the soul, and then having done so, at some point later in life, offer them to the world in some form of service. The service component is something that I have seen in literally every pre-birth plan I've ever looked at.
Really, that's phenomenal.
Mhm.
I have a whole chapter called From Karma to Dharma, which talks about that, the wound being, like the gift being in the wound, and that the work, just because you get wounded doesn't mean you fulfill your life's purpose. It's when you see the gift that the wound offered you, that becomes the gift. That's what you can serve people with. And that's phenomenal that for everyone that had a pre-birth plan. Could you tell listeners a little bit about what brought you to this kind of work? Because you didn't start out, with this knowledge. It's not knowledge that any of us started out with that we remember.
Yeah, I started in a very different place. For the first 40 years of my life, I was a very mainstream kind of person. I had an MBA. I was in the corporate sector doing marketing communications, as a self-employed consultant. And I did that for a number of years. I liked the writing, but the work itself, the things that I was writing about were not really of any interest to me. And all in all, that kind of work left me feeling very unfulfilled. But at the same time, I had the distinct sense that there was something I was supposed to be doing here. I just didn't know what it was and wasn't even sure how to figure out what it was. And so I tried different things, career counseling, the Myers-Briggs, and so forth. None of this really shed any light on the matter. And so on May 7th of 2003, I did something I had never done before, and that is I had a session with the psychic medium. And I remember the date because it was really on that day that my life changed. She introduced me to the concept of spirit guides, which I had never even heard of at that time. And she explained that a guide is a highly evolved, non-physical being with whom we plan our lives before we're born and who then guides us after we come into body. And through this particular medium, I was actually able to talk with my guides. Now, they said a lot of amazing things to me in that session, one of which was they said, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I just shook my head and I said, why in the world would I have done that? And they were able to answer that question. The really interesting thing was that they knew what all of my challenges had been without me telling them anything about myself. So as you can imagine, this gave them total credibility. And then they went on and gave me this detailed explanation as to why I had planned my challenges. Well, that rocked my world. And I thought about this constantly for weeks after the session. And the effect that this information had on me was that it created a deep healing because it allowed me to see for the first time the deeper spiritual meaning and purpose of the challenges I had gone through. And it was at that point I realized I was onto a perspective that could bring a similar kind of healing to others. And then I started to think about writing a book on the subject.
Phenomenal. Uh, Rob, it's happened with almost every speaker, right? Has said they remember the day actually when something changed their life. And for one person, it was hearing a mantra. For another, it was being in a field of love, of activists who are, together for a common purpose. Everybody is saying that there are these moments, these pivotal moments, and those are planned out too, aren't they?
To a very large extent. It's not the case that literally everything is planned prior to birth, but the planning is very detailed, very specific. Pivotal moments, important things, these are generally planned.
Yeah. I mean, the work you're doing is, you know, as a therapist, I try to move people through things, and my work is somewhat, transpersonal and spiritual, so that I'm always, seeing if someone's capable of true, what I call true forgiveness, which is realizing that there's nothing to forgive, right? And not everyone is. And that's something I have discovered, at least that, I find a wall. Do you find that too, with when, as you help people to see these things, some people can really take it in and others not?
That is definitely the case. Um, I think basically what my work does, this focus on pre-birth planning, is that for those who are ready for it, it pulls them out of victim consciousness. But not everybody actually wants to get out of victim consciousness because there are a lot of secondary benefits to it. It's a way to bond with other people who see themselves as victims.
Yeah.
It's a way to feel that you are right and others are wrong. It's a way not to take responsibility for your own spiritual growth. And when I say these things, I truly say them with that judgment. It's only natural and human that people would have those kinds of reactions. But at some point, if you're going to continue down the spiritual path, you have to rise above those things and take full responsibility for what has happened to you. And that includes realizing that you are the powerful soul who planned your life, including your biggest challenges.
Yeah. It's so powerful to know that. I also, I have a good friend who's makes a living as an intuitive, and I've asked her some questions, like if some, like say it's a horrible accident, just or a rape or something just horrible that happens to somebody. Is it always pre-planned, or I mean, there are other people's plans intersecting with your plan, right? How does that work for people?
Well, let me give an example from my first book, Your Soul's Plan. And actually, let me mention first, if your viewers go to yoursoulsplan.com, which is my website, you can read large portions of both books for free on the books pages of the website. In my first book, Your Soul's Plan, there's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning of accidents. And I put accidents in quotes here because they aren't really accidents.
Yeah.
One of the stories there is about a woman who is blown up in a bomb explosion. The bomber is somebody who's taking back into body unhealed energies from past lives, not for the purpose of expressing them, but for the purpose of healing them. But this is a big undertaking. It's understood he may not be successful. And if he isn't successful, it's foreseen that he is highly likely to plant a bomb, which this woman will be in the bomb explosion. So what is discussed we go into her pre-birth planning session working with a medium who can actually hear the conversation that took place there. She's retrieving it from the Akashic record.
Yeah.
And what they are discussing is, what will this woman do if this person is successful in healing himself and so the bomb never takes place? And she puts in place a number of backup plans, a severe car accident, a couple other things like that, all of which are intended to create, at least temporarily, great physical disability so that she can heal herself from the trauma and then take all of that learning and wisdom and knowledge about healing and turn it outward in service to others. So if the bomber had been successful in healing himself and had not planted the bomb, there were any number of backup plans in place in which she would have gone through a major trauma. This is what she wanted because she wanted to have a lifetime as a gifted healer, and that was her pathway to get there.
Oh my goodness, so powerful. And that must be so liberating for someone who's undergone that. And even I was thinking, just for parents of, if they lose a child or something, you know, to know what that was about. So you work with this, the intuitive, the psychic person who can tap in, and you work actually all at the same time together?
That's how we research people's pre-birth plans for the two books. There's a team of gifted mediums and channels, and in one way or another, each one of them can find out what somebody planned before birth and why they made those plans. Now, in my own work as a hypnotist, I do things very differently. I do primarily what is called a between lives soul regression, or a life between lives regression. In that kind of hypnosis session, the client speaks with what is called the Council of Elders. These are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee reincarnation on Earth. They know everything about the client, the plan for the current life, and every past life that has ever been lived. So in this case, I'm facilitating a process in which people can speak directly with those in spirit who know their life plan. And if they get in front of the council, that is a life-changing experience, because the council can answer literally any question that is put to them. People will come out of a meeting with the council and they'll say, I have no more questions about my life. They answered every single one.
Wow, it's amazing. I mean, this must be very rewarding for you. I mean, do you get feedback from people, you know, how your sessions have changed their lives?
I do, and I actually put some of that feedback on the Between Lives regression page of my online store, just so people could get a sense of what this kind of session can do. It's tremendously gratifying for me to know that I'm having such a big impact on a person's life. I actually maintain a folder of emails that people have sent to me talking about how the sessions or the books have changed their lives. And there are several thousand emails in there now. And I have these images of myself, you know, 30 or 40 years from now, when I'm old and gray and retired. I'm going to go into that folder and reread all of those. And I think that that will be a very heartwarming experience for me.
I think it would be great to go to look at that legacy. So you had that experience a while back, and they told you about what had happened, right? You got from your guides what had happened. Do people get to find out ahead of time? Or, I mean, that's a big question, you know. Do we get
You mean, do people know before they come into the incarnation what is going to happen?
No, while they're here in physical form, and can they find out what those, in other words, can they find out what the plan is and change it?
You can certainly find out what the plan is, and there are a number of ways to do that. The most profound, in my opinion, is the Between Lives soul regression, because it's a direct experience. It's you talking to the Council of Elders. You're not depending upon someone else to retrieve information from spirit for you.
Yeah.
Let me quickly list the other ways you can find out what you planned before you were born. Astrology. Any good astrologer should be able to tell you a lot about your pre-birth plan.
Yeah.
Numerology. You can work with a numerologist, but you don't have to. Just get a basic book on numerology. Do the calculations yourself. They're quite easy.
Yeah.
Dream work. Ask before you go to bed. Pose a question to your guides, your soul. What is my life plan? Ask for a dream that contains an answer. Ask to be awakened when the dream ends. Keep pen and paper or a recorder next to the bed so you can write it down or describe it. This is a great way to get an answer to any question.
Yeah.
And also, your life plan is encoded on your palm print, and there are people who know how to analyze that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do to find out what you planned. Now, can you change it? Yes and no. It depends on how important a particular experience is to your soul. If it's vitally important, you could ask that it not happen if it's something challenging, but it may still then happen if your soul feels that you need it for your growth and learning.
Yeah.
But having said that, pre-birth plans are modified all the time. And the way it's usually done is that you leave your body when you sleep at night. You travel in your light body or spirit body to the astral realm. You meet with the other significant people in your life. And basically you ask the question, are we learning what we came here to learn? If the answer is yes, then carry on. If the answer is no, then you talk about what do you need to change so that you can learn it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You know what? I came to write my book after a very big challenge, very big, long, extended time of challenge. And I'd had many in my life, but this one was, I was older too, and it somehow had more weight to it. And while I was going through it, I knew that it was part of my plan. So I absolutely understood the whole way through. So it did not keep me from occasionally having that, why is this happening to me? Like I could still go there, but
Right.
I would then go, well, because it has to. And that I would have the answer was right there and say, oh, I don't like it. Well, you don't have to like it, you just have to get through it,
Right.
But that's really how I talked to myself through this. And I knew that I would write a book because and you know what, really, I'm so practical. It must be my Virgo moon. I thought, why would I go through all this and not help other people with it?
Yeah.
Really, I did. And it, of course, as you know, when you write a book, you teach yourself, the book teaches you, the spirit guides come and help you, and they did. And it's like, oh, okay. And now there's a second book already almost written too. So, but it really makes a difference when people know that they planned it when they're going through it.
Yeah, that is the key piece, and that's the value of this kind of work. There's really nothing worse than going through some form of suffering and at the same time believing that it's random, arbitrary, and devoid of meaning. Meaningless suffering, or apparently meaningless suffering, is very difficult to endure. But if you know what the meaning is, or you even just think that you know what the meaning is, even if you're not correct about the underlying meaning, the assignment of meaning to the experience alleviates a great portion of the suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it conscious suffering in the book, and that it's something that what it helps me do, I know, is that I don't resist it as much. And when you don't resist it, it's just not as much suffering, It actually kind of alleviates the suffering. But it doesn't mean, again, that the inner critic doesn't say, you sure messed up or any of that. It's just that there's another part of the self that knows. I know that it's my soul. I have a strong connection to my soul, is saying, well, yeah, but we had to do this. This is, and so I love that now. And it got stronger after I read your book. I had been doing that. I had, but it got I don't know. I don't know that anybody's quite written a book quite as clear as yours about the whole planning. You mentioned a little while ago Akashic records, and I know that not everybody knows what that is. So, could you let people know a little bit about the Akashic records?
Sure. The Akashic record is the complete non-physical record of every word, thought, and action relevant to the earth plane, including the pre-birth planning. So this is the means by which many mediums and channels access information about past lives, the current life plan, the pre-birth planning session. Some of the channeling sessions that were done for my two books, Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift, they were trance-channeling sessions in which the consciousness of the channel would leave the physical body, and an ascended master would literally come into the body and begin to speak through that person's vocal cords. When the ascended master does that, he's tapping into the Akashic record to tell us what the person planned before coming into body and why they made those plans.
So a lot of people, there are a lot of people reading the records now, Akashic records. And I even heard that there were, there's evidence of Akashic record of everything that's happened, that like, the World Trade Center, all of it. It's all been there, and people have actually known. And so much is hidden, though. I feel that people knowing this in a way is so empowering. And how do I want to say that? There's a lot of going to sleep right now, and there's a lot of waking up. That's what I see. Polarities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that having this awareness keeps you awake. And so it's subversive, kind of. It's subversive information in the sense of, if we really are so instrumental in all that's happening in our lives, we never have to hang our head down. We never have to go into victim. Like, we could change victim consciousness with that, which is, what, the Buddha was trying to teach with the wheel of samskara, everything really. It's totally empowering. It would be really great to hear maybe, one, you probably have a lot of them, of your favorite stories of how it really changed someone's life to have this information about their pre-birth plan.
Well, the most powerful story in the books, in my opinion, is the one that I referred to earlier about the woman who was blown up in the bomb explosion. So let me tell you more about what happened with her. When I interviewed her for Your Soul's Plan, she was in her 60s, but she shared with me the following story that took place when she had been in her 20s. At that time, she was employed as an administrative assistant at Pomona College in California. And one of her daily duties in that job was to pick up her boss's mail. The mailboxes were located in the basement of the building in which she worked. Her name is Christina, by the way. So on one particular day, just as she had done many, many times before, Christina descended those stairs to the basement mailboxes. But on this particular day, unbeknownst to her, somebody had planted a pipe bomb in her boss's mailbox. When she inserted her hand, the pipe bomb detonated. And the force from this explosion was so great, it actually picked Christina up off the ground and threw her 10 feet backwards against a concrete wall. There were 6-foot splinters of wood that were shot like arrows out of a bow into the wall around her. Both eardrums were ruptured, 2 fingers were severed, and flames from the explosion scorched her body from head to toe. When she got to the hospital, doctors actually had to hold magnets over her eyes to extract the shrapnel from the pipe. So we're talking here about a level of suffering that's almost unimaginable to the average person.
Yeah.
Her recovery took 2 years and 10 reconstructive surgeries. At one point during that 2-year period, she was lying in her hospital bed in a tremendous amount of pain when all of a sudden she heard a voice inside her head, a voice that was not her own. It turns out that the force of that explosion, in addition to doing a lot of damage to her body, had opened up her psychic gift. She had become clairaudient. And the voice she heard that day was one of her guides. The guide said to her, "You planned this." And of course, she said, "Why?" Not an unreasonable question. And then the guide told her, he said, "You wanted before you were born to have an incarnation as a gifted healer. And you knew pre-birth that if you could heal yourself from the devastating effects of this bomb explosion, you could then take all of that wisdom and knowledge about healing and turn it outward in service to others." Well, after she recovered from the 10 surgeries, she went on to get a PhD in speech-language pathology. She set up a private clinical practice. And at this point in her career, she's healed literally thousands of people. She actually has the ability to go into a patient's brain energetically, by which I mean non-invasively, and restore language processing capability in people who have lost that due to stroke or accident. So an extraordinarily gifted healer, and the only reason she can do any of this is because she healed herself first from that bomb explosion. Now, when I interviewed Christina for the book, she said 2 amazing things to me. The first was, she said, "Rob, I have completely forgiven the person who planted that bomb." Now remember, this is somebody who had magnets held above her eyeballs in the hospital. And yet here she is saying in complete sincerity that she has forgiven that person.
Yeah.
But then she said something even more remarkable, and similar to what you said at the beginning of the interview. She said, "Rob, I am deeply grateful to the person who planted that bomb." And when she says she's deeply grateful, she really and truly means it. This to me is one of the most amazing stories I've seen that shows what you can do with an awareness of your pre-birth plan.
Yeah.
Now, it didn't happen overnight. She had to work with that awareness over a period of years,
Yeah.
but she did that work, and that allowed her to get to a place of total forgiveness and then a place of total gratitude. If she can get there after what she went through, then you and I and your viewers can do it in regard to whatever we've gone through. That's the power of an awareness of your pre-birth plan.
That's remarkable, remarkable story. What a beautiful, and she came to that knowing, not through outside teachers, it's through her own direct healing process and accessing her guides, right?
That's right. Right.
That is so important. I think that's been a really big message for a lot of the speakers. This is not the age of the guru. This is the this is the age of the guide. As I like to say, a guide. That's what we need, is a guide to show us point us the way inside, and that we have that. Some people, I guess, call that kind of intelligence spiritual intelligence. It's, I think, emotional and spiritual intelligence, but it's beyond emotional intelligence. And, you know, my real belief, Rob, is that that's the intelligence that will heal the planet. If, you know, and I don't mean just heal the planet, because the planet's fine. It's like heal everybody on the planet, you know, that it's the intelligence that we're longing for. For people that are just beginning to maybe understand or hear about this concept, I do bring it up to some people in my work, and I always make sure, because they didn't come to me for that necessarily, but I always try to assess whether they're ready to hear it and they've already done some work with self-compassion before I have them consider that this was a plan, you know. But is there anything that you would suggest that people begin to do to be able to open to this kind of understanding? Because it's not a mental thing.
No, but you know, it can start in the mind and then move into the heart. I think what I would recommend, and it's really quite easy and simple, is that when something quote bad happens, and you could do it with positive things as well, you could ask yourself the question, if I planned this, why might I have done that? And when you phrase the question that way, it doesn't require any pre-existing belief in pre-birth planning. You're just doing it more as a matter of speculation. But by asking that question, you start to draw to yourself the insights that answer it. And you get at the underlying spiritual meaning and purpose, even if you don't believe in the concept of pre-birth planning.
That's beautiful. I love that. That just to ask, you know, if I did plan this, why might I have done that? And that really, it's like it opens up possibility. That is brilliant. Thank you. And there's I have a little version of that. Is like, what am I to learn from this? But you know, I like that question. Why might I have done it? Because it's not jumping the gun. You know, it's not trying to get a lesson before you even consider that you had a part in it. You know,
right? Exactly.
Is there anything else important that you about your work that you? I mean, there's so much I know, but like a message that you want to leave viewers with. I know that people that have been fortunate enough to listen and will first of all, they're going to want to know how to get a hold of you. And I did say that in the beginning, and I want you to say that again. But anything else that you want to share that you feel is important at this time?
Well, to get a hold of me, the website is yoursoulsplan.com. There's a contact form there, or you can just write to rob.schwartz, SCHWARTZ, at yoursoulsplan.com. I think the message I would like to leave people with is this. The earth, as I understand it, isn't literally the most difficult place to have an incarnation, but it is considered one of the most difficult. And the simple fact that you are here in body now that makes you among the most courageous beings in the universe, because there are a lot of beings who don't have the courage to come here. So I would just say, acknowledge and honor and respect yourself for the great courage you have for coming into body on planet Earth at this time.
Yeah, thank you. That is, you know, it. I want to just honor you right now for your willingness to learn why you came here and share it with all of us. It's a true gift. Thank you, Rob.
Well, thank you, and you're welcome. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Same. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.